material world. Consider the haunting precision of the bone picker's daily routine as captured in Henry Mayhew's pioneering 1844 work, London Labor and the London Poor. It usually takes the bone picker from 7 to 9 hours to go over his rounds, during which time he travels from 20 to 30 miles with a quarter to a half hundredweight on his back. In the summer, he usually reaches home about 11 of the day, and in the winter about 1 or 2. On his return home, he proceeds to sort the contents of his bag. He separates the rags from the bones, and these again from the old metal, if he be lucky enough to have found any. He divides the rags into various lots, according as they are white or colored. And if he have picked up any pieces of canvas or sacking, he makes these also into a separate parcel. When he has finished the sorting, he takes his several lots to the rag shop or the marine store dealer, and realizes upon them whatever they may be worth. For the white rags he gets from 2d to 3d per pound, according as they are clean or soiled. The white rags are very difficult to be found. They are mostly very dirty, and are therefore sold with the colored ones at the rate of about £5 for 2d. The homeless continue to haunt today's post-industrial cities, but they rarely display the professional clarity of the bone picker's impromptu trade for 2 primary reasons. First, minimum wages and government assistance are now substantial enough that it no longer makes economic sense to eke out a living as a scavenger. Where wages remain depressed, scavenging remains a vital occupation. Witness the perpendadores of Mexico City. The bone collector's trade has also declined because most modern cities possess elaborate systems for managing the waste generated by their inhabitants. In fact, the closest American equivalent to the Victorian scavengers, the aluminum can collectors you sometimes see hovering outside supermarkets, rely on precisely those waste management systems for their paycheck. But London in 1854 was a Victorian metropolis trying to make do with an Elizabethan public infrastructure. The city was vast even by today's standards, with 2.5 million people crammed inside a 30-mile circumference. But most of the techniques for managing that kind of population density that we now take for granted, recycling centers, public health departments, safe sewage removal, hadn't been invented yet. And so the city itself improvised a response, an unplanned organic response to be sure, but at the same time a response that was precisely contoured to the community's waste removal needs. As the garbage and excrement grew, an underground market for refuse developed, with hooks into established trades. Specialists emerged, each dutifully carting goods to the appropriate site in the official market. The bone collectors selling their goods to the bone boilers, the pure finders selling their dog shit to tanners, who used the pure to rid their leather goods of the lime they had soaked in for weeks to remove animal hair. A process widely considered to be, as one tanner put it, the most disagreeable in the whole range of manufacture. We're naturally inclined to consider these scavengers tragic figures, and to fulminate against a system that allowed so many thousands to eke out a living by foraging through human waste. In many ways, this is the correct response. It was, to be sure, the response of the great crusaders of the age, among them Dickens and Mayhew. But such social outrage should be accompanied by a measure of wonder and respect. Without any central planner coordinating their actions, without any education at all, this itinerant underclass managed to conjure up an entire system for processing and sorting the waste generated by 2 million people. The great contribution usually ascribed to Mayhew's London Labor is simply his willingness to see and record the details of these impoverished lives. But just as valuable was the insight that came out of that bookkeeping once he had run the numbers. Far from being unproductive vagabonds, Mayhew discovered these people were actually performing an essential function for their community. The removal of the refuse of a large town, he wrote, is perhaps one of the most important of social operations, and the scavengers of Victorian London weren't just getting rid of that refuse, they were recycling it. Waste recycling is usually assumed to be an invention of the environmental movement, as modern as the blue plastic bags we now fill with detergent bottles and soda cans. But it is an ancient art. Composting pits were used by the citizens of Knossos in Crete 4,000 years ago. Much of medieval Rome was built out of materials pilfered from the crumbling ruins of the imperial city. Before it was a tourist landmark, the Colosseum served as a de facto quarry. Waste recycling, in the form of composting and manure spreading, played a crucial role in the explosive growth of medieval European towns. High-density collections of human beings, by definition, require significant energy inputs to be sustainable, starting with reliable supplies of food. The towns of the Middle Ages lacked highways and container ships to bring them sustenance, and so their population sizes were limited by the fecundity of the land around them. If the land could grow only enough food to sustain 5,000 people, then 5,000 people became the ceiling. But by plowing their organic waste back into the earth, the early medieval towns increased the productivity of the soil, thus raising the population ceiling, thereby creating more waste and increasingly fertile soil. This feedback loop transformed the boggy expanses of the Low Countries, which had historically been incapable of sustaining anything more complex than isolated bands of fishermen, into some of the most productive soils in all of Europe. To this day, the Netherlands has the highest population density of any country in the world. Waste recycling turns out to be a hallmark of almost all complex systems, whether the man-made ecosystems of urban life or the microscopic economies of the cell. Our bones are themselves the result of a recycling scheme pioneered by natural selection billions of years ago. All nucleated organisms generate excess calcium as a waste product. Since at least the Cambrian times, organisms have accumulated those calcium reserves and put them to good use, building shells, teeth, skeletons. Your ability to walk upright is due to evolution's knack for recycling its toxic waste. Waste recycling is a crucial attribute of the Earth's most diverse ecosystems. We value tropical rainforests because they squander so little of the energy supplied by the sun, thanks to their vast interlocked system of organisms exploiting every tiny niche of the nutrient cycle. The cherished diversity of the rainforest ecosystem is not just a quaint case of biological multiculturalism. The diversity of the system is precisely why rainforests do such a brilliant job of capturing the energy that flows through them. One organism captures a certain amount of energy, but in processing that energy, it generates waste. In an efficient system, that waste becomes a new source of energy for another creature in the chain. That efficiency is one of the reasons why clearing the rainforests is such a short-sighted move. The nutrient cycles in their ecosystems are so tight that the soil is usually very poor for farming. All the available energy has been captured on its way down to the forest floor. Coral reefs display a comparable knack for waste management. Corals live in a symbiotic alliance with tiny algae called zooxanthellae. Thanks to photosynthesis, the algae capture sunlight and use it to turn carbon dioxide into organic carbon, with oxygen as a waste product of the process. The coral then uses the oxygen in its own metabolic cycle. Because we're aerobic creatures ourselves, we tend not to think of oxygen as a waste product, but from the point of view of the algae, that's precisely what it is. A useless substance discharged as part of its metabolic cycle. The coral itself produces waste in the form of carbon dioxide, nitrates, and phosphates, all of which help the algae to grow. That tight waste recycling chain is one of the primary reasons coral reefs are able to support such a dense and diverse population of creatures.